Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ainur Irdina, batch number 2315782, and today I'll be presenting the book Islamic Thought and Approach to Reform by Taha Jabir Al-Alwani. So first, I'll start by introducing the author and his background. So Dr. Taha Jabir was a renowned scholar in Islamic legal theory and thought. He published numerous influential works such as The Ethics of Disagreement in Islam and Apostasy in Islam, a historical and scriptural analysis where he addressed contemporary issues, helping to shape discussions that still remain relevant today in both Muslim and academic frameworks. Okay, so next I'll shift into the ideas of the book, which is Islamic Thought and Approach to Reform. So this book, it focuses on the need for a reformation of Islamic thought to address the challenges of the modern world through three main ideas. So the first one, we have the Islamization of knowledge. So Al-Alwani calls for the integration of Islamic values into all areas of knowledge, making sure that the academic world reflect Islamic worldview and ethics. Okay, so secondly, we have the categorization of knowledge. He proposed an approach to organize knowledge into different categories, which helps to understand and apply Islamic teachings more effectively in different contexts. And then lastly, we have the necessity of ijtihad. So Al-Alwani stresses the importance of ijtihad, which means independent reasoning, to reinterpret Islamic rulings and philosophy in light of contemporary needs, making sure that Islam remains relevant even in the modern world. To begin, Al-Alwani strongly advocates for the Islamization of knowledge in his book. So in the first chapter, he addressed the issue of dualism of knowledge among Muslim society, where Islamic sciences like Quranic studies or Islamic jurisprudence are considered as sacred, but people are often disconnected with it when it comes to worldly concerns. And on the other hand, modern sciences like social sciences are seen as secular, but lack social and moral guidance at the same time. So this split creates two major problems. First, is that it causes a disconnect between faith and life, meaning that many Muslims don't see how Islamic teachings apply in modern issues. And this gap stunts the growth of Islamic intellectual traditions because they're not updated with modern challenges. And then secondly, it leads to a lack of ethical framework in scientific advancements. So for example, in our time, technologies are very advanced, but there's a lack of moral or social knowledge in science. And to combat this issue, Al-Alwani promotes the concept of Tawheed, which means the oneness of God. So he believes that all knowledge, regardless scientific or religious, should be seen from a monotheistic lens. So as Al-Alwani quotes in page 66, the Islamization of knowledge is based on a combined reading of Revelation, and the created universe is founded upon monotheism, which is Tawheed. So in other words, by incorporating Tawheed, the Islamization of knowledge ensures that Islamic teachings remain relevant even in the modern world, because it reconnects faith and life by filling in the gaps between sacred and secular knowledge, ultimately fostering a more connected society. Okay, so next I'll be discussing the categorization of knowledge in Islamic thought, drawing on the works of Ibn al-Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim. So in the book, Al-Alwani cited these two scholars in promoting the idea that ilm, which means knowledge, is not just about acquiring information, but it's also about its transformative potential. So he does this by categorizing knowledge into two fields, which are legal sciences and non-legal sciences. As Al-Alwani quotes, as for those aspects of such sciences which do correspond to objective reality, they may be divided into two types. First, the type of ilm which brings one's soul to completion, as in the case of the knowledge of God, His names, attributes, actions, books, commands, and prohibitions. And second, the type of ilm which does not contribute to the soul's perfection or completeness. So the former, which is legal sciences, It refers to the knowledge that completes the soul. So some examples of this would be the Quran and Sunnah. And then for the latter, which are the non-legal sciences, it's divided into three types, which are praiseworthy, blameworthy, and permissible, according to Al-Ghazali. So, for example, astronomy and knowledge of the celestial bodies, like they are useful knowledge, but they're not really relevant, when it comes to spiritual growth. It does not better you spiritually. So the quote follows with the Prophet's prayer against useless knowledge, which highlights the importance of pursuing meaningful and transformative knowledge, because the dignity of any knowledge is dependent on the urgency of human need for it. And obviously, knowledge of God is the most dignified knowledge because it's derived from divine sources. And this framework ultimately illustrates how Islam emphasizes the connection between intellectual pursuits with spiritual growth. And by emphasizing knowledge that fosters spiritual growth and promotes public good, this approach ensures that Islam will remain relevant in addressing modern challenges, leading the way for a meaningful reform. So moving on, one of the main themes in the book is the concept of ijtihad as a necessity for reform. So what exactly is ijtihad? Ijtihad, it basically means independent reasoning. It refers to the effort exerted by a scholar to derive a legal ruling from Muslim legal sources, such as the Quran and Hadith, and to also reach certainty on ambiguous questions. So in simple terms, Al-Alwani, he really stressed on ijtihad as pivotal, as important for reform, because he encourages scholars to go beyond traditional interpretations to address contemporary issues like modern technology, social structure, and governance. These types of issues require Muslim scholars to address modern challenges while still conforming to Islamic rulings. So furthermore, Taha Jabir al-Alwani also criticizes Muslim society's adoption of Western ideas such as Darwinism, Marxism, and other similar school of thoughts. So as the quote follows, when the Ummah becomes lost in this way, removing itself from its Islamic cultural context and allowing others to lead it culturally and present Western thought with all of its Greek, pagan, crusader-like roots and its Darwinist, Freudian, Marxist, it succumbs to a sort of intellectual deception. So, in other words, he highlights the risk of intellectual deception among Muslim society because these Western ideas, they are incompatible with Islamic principles, which eventually can lead to a loss of identity. So, the adoption of Western ideologies holds high risks of Islamic thought being overshadowed. So ultimately, Al-Alwani emphasizes the need for a critical reform by emphasizing the importance of reclaiming authentic Islamic thought and ensure its relevance in addressing contemporary challenges. So in conclusion, Taha Jabir al-Alwani's book, Islamic Thought: An Approach to Reform, offers a valuable framework in addressing the societal challenges that the Muslim world is facing today. In the book, he first started by introducing the idea of Islamization of knowledge, where religious and secular knowledge are brought together under the concept of Tawheed, which means the oneness of God, helping to fill in the gap between secular and sacred knowledge. Al-Alwani also discusses the categorization of knowledge, where he emphasized transformative knowledge, arguing that knowledge shouldn't just be about acquiring information, but it's also about its potential in transforming individuals and society as a whole. Another key point in this book is the necessity of ijtihad, which means independent reasoning. Al-Alwani, he really stressed on ijtihad. He really stressed on the importance of scholars engaging with contemporary issues through the reinterpretation of Islamic teachings to make sure that Islamic principles remain relevant even in the modern world. So ultimately, by encouraging flexible approaches to Islamic principles principles, Al-Anwani's ideas promote adaptable Islamic thoughts, where society can address modern issues while still conforming to Islamic traditions, paving the way for reform. So overall, Al-Anwani's work calls for an intellectual and social reform in the Muslim Ummah, where faith and reason should come together to face the complexity of the modern world.